2016 has single-handedly been the most interesting year of my life. Kind of like riding a roller coaster. It just won't level out and no operator be found anywhere. But for all the good and bad that's come with it, in the end, I'm happy to be here. And, of course, I'm happy that you're here with me.
We are the Knights of Awakening.
Knights of Awakening, broadcasting from our corner of the universe to yours. I'm your host, Knight Justin, reaching out to all of you, our brothers and sisters, wherever you may call home. Hello and welcome to the Knights of Awakening. I am your host, Justin Bain. Today's going to be the final episode, maybe not the final update for those who are interested, but certainly the final chapter in the Road to Recovery series. Now, some of you may be asking, why did it take so long to do this final chapter? Well, for that, I got three semi-good reasons, I suppose. They're reasons nonetheless. The first was that I was waiting for a good time to conclude this series, and I wanted to do it on Blog Talk Radio because it's a platform that I like using. It opens the possibility to have on-the-spot interaction with all of you, and because we have core listeners here at Blog Talk Radio that may not visit our YouTube page where the series started and was hosted for parts 1 through 6. The second reason is because there was more information to come and there was more time in between this last portion that I needed to flesh out since the last episode, part 6, and I think it's a great time to conclude this series. And I'm quickly coming to an end of this experience, or gosh, I hope so. Finally, the last reason is because I've been receiving messages over the last few weeks and emails and from many of you out there who were wondering how the healing process was going for me. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to share that with everyone at the same time rather than trying to respond to a bunch of emails and messages and such. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to listen to part 1 of the Road to Recovery, New Beginnings. So that way everybody's on the same page, and then we'll talk about it here in just a few minutes. So enjoy the clip. It is titled The Road to Recovery and New Beginnings, which will be just a kind of an introduction to the series, a launching point. Kind of fitting that both myself and the KOA find ourselves at a point of reevaluation, new beginnings. The timing of it couldn't have been more perfect, I guess. Both of us trying to heal and become stronger and better than we were before. Those of you who are friends with me on Facebook, on my personal Facebook page, you may know that about a month ago I suffered a severe accident that left me with multiple fractures in my left leg. One of those fractures actually almost came out of the skin. 2 torn tendons and a severely dislocated and separated ankle. I underwent a surgery already to repair everything, and I'll probably have 1 or 2 more smaller surgeries to remove some of the hardware that I won't need after, 4 or 6 months or whatever. A lot like the KOA suffered a sort of fracturing and splintering just a few short years ago, forcing those that stuck around to repair and rebuild it. Over the years, the KOA had enjoyed decent success. I mean, we certainly met many of the goals that I had in mind. It wasn't financially successful, although I think in part it wasn't really built to be financially successful. We certainly hoped that we could sustain it financially, but that just didn't work out. And just like life, a sudden change of wind caused much of it to become crashing down, leaving those of us who were here wondering just what the hell happened. It brought us to a point we had to stop and reevaluate, and it was time to stop and let it heal. I was talking about the timing and kind of the coincidence, if you will. I don't believe in coincidences, but the coincidence, if you will, of how I kind of suffered the same fate as the KOA. I mean, it didn't kill me, but it certainly left me broken and unable to do a lot of the things I wanted to do. In all my years, I'd never been injured like this before. I've always been strong, smart, capable, and careful enough to avoid stuff like this, even though I spent most of my adult life working in jobs and environments where injuries like this and much worse are common. And in my personal life, I've always been the shoulder, the rock, and the foundation that everybody kind of came to and stood on and looked to for guidance and help and a place to stand. In my short life, I have survived being stabbed, shot at, been involved in riots and chaotic melees and brawls where everything not nailed down to the floor had now become a weapon, and where physical altercation was almost a certainty every single day. So when I broke my leg while performing such a stupid little mundane task as simply walking across a parking lot, it was something that I had a lot of trouble understanding and coming to terms with. I mean, how the hell does this happen? How do I survive so many potential brushes with death and or serious bodily harm just to be done in by a stupid little patch of invisible ice and completely wreck an important part of my body? I mean, I need it to walk and run, but more importantly, I need it for my quality of life, but also my livelihood. I mean, if I can't walk, then I can't work. And it's been about a month since I broke my leg. And I've had a month to go through the surgery, and I've had a couple of weeks of healing now. But I tell you, as I sat there within, I'd say, the first week, I was unable to do hardly anything. And I really felt helpless for the first time in my life. I mean, like I said, I've always been capable. I've always been strong. I've always been the one that got stuff done. And here I was, sitting here, not being able to do anything, but feel sorry for myself, of course. And because of my reliance on strength, will, and raw power, I am now reminded of just how very human I am, almost a month later. How easily even the strongest among us can be broken when we forget the rest of ourselves, when we neglect certain important things in our lives. Pride and fear take over, revealing themselves as the culprits, forcing me personally to reevaluate and to not only heal my damaged body, but my mind and spirit as well. I've been faced with lessons long forgot, and I will share them with you throughout the course of this series. The reason I titled this series the way I did, because it's both a period of recovery for not only myself, but the KOA as well. New beginnings are on the horizons for both of us. And with a fresh perspective, a fresh outlook, and a return to basics, I am certain we can overcome any obstacle put forth in front of us. This is not only a launching point for the KOA to start anew, but a fresh outlook for me as well, personally. And for those of you who know me, I know it might seem silly that a big tough guy like me would sit here and complain about breaking my leg. I know it seems kind of a normal thing, and maybe it's normal to most people, but like I said, I've never been brought down like this before. I've never been humbled in front of myself because of something like this. I have experienced fear in ways that I had never even thought that I could experience. I have been forced to look at things like gratitude, humbleness, patience. I mean, it sounds silly to me too. You have no idea how many times I had thought about just deleting everything and not even doing this and just trying to come up with something else. But for some reason, it seems like this is what I need to do. And like I said, throughout this series, we're going to explore some lessons that I had forgotten and that I have been faced with because I have been brought down to myself. And I talked about some of those already: humility, gratitude, but I also talk about mindfulness, compassion, empathy, and probably a few others. Like I said in that clip, you guys have no idea how many times my pride and my ego was, I was fighting a battle to decide whether or not to even do this series. Because I know, people break bones all the time. And I know, I mean, maybe I thought it was a normal thing before because I never experienced it. I've been stabbed before. I got stabbed right in my abdomen, and I didn't even think that was a big deal. But to me, breaking my leg was like the worst thing that has ever happened to me. And I know that sounds silly, and even now, after all this time, this happened in February. We're now in August, and even now, I kind of think it's silly in a way. But the experience was real. I had nightmares for weeks and weeks and weeks. Had nightmares, reliving the incident over and over again. I never imagined how breaking my leg could cause so much psychological issues too. It was weird. It was really weird. And I don't sit here and think I'm complaining or whatever. And if you are, I don't care. But this was a humbling experience for me. But the forced time away from that, despite the pain, despite the nightmares, the sleepless nights, the surgeries, facing fears like doctors and hospitals, I don't like those kinds of things. But it was what I needed to get, for one, to kind of reevaluate and take a step back. And maybe that's why it happened. I mean, these things happened. It was a freak accident. There's no way it should have happened. I had fallen down 1,000 times, and I always just get up, dust myself off and look around, make sure no one's seen me. And if they did, kind of, play it off, ha, ha, ha. But it was something I needed to do. The KOA had been on hold, on ice, whatever, for about a year, maybe a little longer, a year and a half. And it was what I needed to get refocused and get back to it. Now, although this year has been real turbulent and chaotic at times, the KOA is going strong, and it's on pace to be the best year we've ever had in almost 10 years. Next July, I think it's June or July, will be 10 years for us that we've been around as the KOA. Actually, no, I'm lying to you. It would be, 8 years. 8 years. I'm trying to give myself 2 extra years credit. Maybe the broken leg hindered my math abilities too. But, 8 years is a long time. But we're on pace to be doing the best that we've done. And I'm very proud of that. Let's go on to part 2 here. We're going to listen to the Road to Recovery Part 2, and then we'll share some thoughts afterwards. Part 2, Gratitude, Fixtures in the Background. So today we're going to be exploring gratitude and how it fits not only into the discussion at hand, but how it fits into our daily lives as well. Now, most everyone expresses gratitude in one degree or the other. Just to name a few, saying thank you when someone gives a gift or holds a door for us, saying grace or giving thanks before eating a meal, being aware and acknowledging the people in your life and the value they add to your life. Fixtures and background noise. Up until my accident, it's not like I somehow forgot to be grateful and thankful in my life. But I certainly found myself somehow taking many things and people for granted. We get to points in our lives where things seem to become automated in a way. Everyday tasks become background noise, and to a point, people in our lives become fixtures. Let me give you an example that I wrote in the blog post that correlates with this episode. I get up in the morning and grab a cup of joe, turn on the TV to the local news, and check the weather and happenings of the day. I slept in as I do many days of the week on the days that I work because I didn't get home until around 3 a.m. When I've had my fill of TV, I go to the computer and check out what's happening with my friends and family. My daily routine filled with background noise and fixtures. I look over and see a clean uniform waiting for me hanging up in the living room ready to go. Simply waiting for me to put the pins, name tag, and badge on so I can look sharp and professional for work that day. Just another typical day filled with background noise and fixtures. I use this example because it's pretty much what my day was comprised of the very day of my accident. The day that changed it. The day I was made humble before myself and my Creator. Just another typical day at work. Take calls for service, act as a problem solver and mediator, perform my everyday duties such as patrolling and conducting my daily business checks, check in on my partner and get briefed on the day's issues and people to look out for. 4 days on duty and 4 days off. It was the last day of my duty cycle. I was looking forward to the weekend. I stopped off to get lunch for later and fill up my patrol vehicle, like I have done countless times. I'm walking across the parking lot, and in a flash, I am laying on the ground with my left foot horribly dislocated after hearing several cracking and popping sounds. I realize that I am in big trouble. My foot snapped back into position, and I start crawling back to my car so I can get out of the road and call on the radio for help. People came out of the woodwork to offer aid and comfort. And in my arrogance, I keep telling them that everything was fine and that they needed to calm down. Even in that moment, I was more concerned with taking control over the situation, giving these strangers tasks and busy work to do. It was my years of training and experience that was taking over, as it's supposed to. The only regret I have is that I wish I could have known their names, and to personally thank each and every one of them for coming to help me. In retrospect, I am grateful for each and every one of them for trying to comfort me. Them not knowing what to do, they still showed up and did the best they could. I took them for granted in my daily life. They were just fixtures in my background. So many people came to my aid that day. My buddies from the fire station, the citizens and bystanders, my partner, my chief, the nurses and doctors, my wife, my mother-in-law, my children, and so many more that escapes my memory. All fawning and caring for me because even though I made myself believe that it was no big deal and that everyone else needed to calm down, they knew I was in much worse shape than I wanted to believe, and they played along for my sake. I am grateful for every single one of them. It was them, not me, that made the best of a bad situation. I can admit it now that some time has passed, and have had time to digest the information and facts and to read the reports. It was worse than I had imagined. I was looking at possible permanent nerve damage, the potential to have to use some sort of walking aid for the rest of my life, the potential to not be able to do the type of job that I've done for so many years and that I love doing so much, and so many other potential long-term issues. Not to get ahead of myself too much, because time will still tell what is in store for me as I continue to heal. I am grateful for them because when I needed to believe that everything was going to be fine, they made sure that I did. Just as kind of a funny, quick side note, I hate being tickled. I don't like it at all, one bit. Last night before bed, my wife was putting lotion on my foot because there's so much dead skin that has to come off, and it's still kind of doing that. I started laughing and giggling because it was tickling me so bad. Now here's the thing I hate so much for my whole life. I now enjoyed it, and it was bringing me joy because it means that I can feel in that foot. It means that the nerves are not completely damaged, that everything's going to be okay on that front. Something I didn't like at all, I was now grateful for because it's one less thing that I have to worry about. In the days following the accident, my wife did everything for me. It still does in some capacity to this day. She fed me, clothed me, covered me to keep me warm, helped me take my medicine, took all of my phone calls, and handled all of my business and affairs. She never left my side. She stayed up with me at night because I was not sleeping, mainly due to the nightmares I was having after the accident. She was my guardian. She was my rock. She was my foundation. She did it because she loves me very much. And she did it because she felt like it was her duty. She did what she had to do. She did for me what I have done for her during her recovery through the many surgeries and illnesses that she has suffered over the years. Of course, I was grateful that she is here for me, and I love her very much for being here for me. It's easy to be grateful for others when you are brought to the moment when something immensely good or bad happens. But what it had brought me to was a place to sit and contemplate the state of gratitude beyond the immediate circumstances. I was able to see the things that I was not mindfully grateful for in my everyday life. Not just being grateful for my wife, but for all the people in my life and the value they add to the quality of my life. Let me tell you what I mean. Earlier I took you through a typical day in my life. Let's look at that again with different lenses. I get up in the morning and grab a cup of joe that my wife got up early to make. I turn on the TV to local news to check the weather and happenings of the day. I slept in as I do many days a week on the days I work because I didn't get home until around 3 a.m. My wife and children get up early and get ready for school and work, taking great care that they do not wake me. When I've had my fill of TV, I go to the computer and check out what's happening with my friends and family, who take the time out of their day to send me things and keep me in the loop of what's going on, if only to put a smile on my face. I look over and see a clean uniform waiting for me hanging up in the living room, ready to go. Simply waiting for me to put the pins, name tag, and badge on so I can look sharp and professional for work. A uniform that is washed and pressed even though she has her own clothes to worry about. As you can see in this example, I have reasons to be grateful every single day. I just let these things become common in my life and I took them for granted. I broke one of the KOA's golden rules. I allowed myself to get comfortable and stagnant. I allowed myself to take moments and people in my life for granted. As I continue the healing process, I vow to give my best effort to take it one step and one moment at a time so that I can be present and grateful for those moments and people that make my life great. I am grateful my eyes were open to this oversight on my part. I'm not happy that I was hurt badly, but I am happy that I can now look at this from a different perspective and see what I have been missing out on. I am grateful for the moments in my life that give validation, but also the moments that give me grief and make me uncomfortable and push me to my limits. I am grateful for the people in my life who offer compassion, comfort, love, understanding, and the opportunity to show them my gratitude and love in return. But I'm equally as grateful for those people who push me to my breaking point and force me to go beyond that. I am grateful that I am able to live my life in a way no matter what happens to me, it is still always on my terms. No one likes to be taken for granted. It does happen to each of us, and in turn we inadvertently do it to the people in our lives. Take a few moments each day to contemplate and acknowledge the people, places, and circumstances in our lives that help not only shape our lives and our experiences, but take time to be grateful to the sum total of these influences that have helped shape us into who we are today. I am grateful for you out there who have taken the time to read the blog post and are listening to this recorded broadcast. So, an awakening, kind of part of our thing, our title, right? Nights of Awakening. Awaken the night within. Well, one way to define awakening, it's an act or moment of becoming suddenly aware of something. And believe me, as you just heard, I became very much aware and suddenly unexpectedly brought to the moment and had that awakening to themes and lessons and the things that I had taught and practiced for years upon years. Funny, I was talking about stagnation, and that is one of the KOA's golden rules from way back when we first started. We used to talk about that a lot, David and I. Don't be stagnant. Don't get caught up in everything. Don't put everything on the back burner like that. Live in the moment. Be present. Be actively aware and actively participate in the moments of your life. As I said in that clip, things became kind of just stuff going on in the background. And I gave you an example of a very typical day in my life and how I seen it before that night happened. And how I seen it afterwards. That's very much an awakening to how my life goes and how the wheels turn and how the machine works and how I'm not the center of the freaking universe all the time. The scary part for me was that although I said a few minutes ago that I used to think that breaking a leg was somewhat normal because I didn't know anything about it. You know, I see people with casts and I see people on crutches and stuff. But as people were telling me about all the potential long-term issues that could happen, and I have to do these surgeries, and I remember thinking, what the hell? Whatever happened to people when you break a leg or an arm or whatever, and they take you to the hospital and they just slap a cast on there and people sign their names and draw pictures on it, and what happened to that? That wasn't for me. They still do that, but that wasn't for me because I tore it up really, really bad. And I didn't want to believe that. And the only regret I have is that it took me being in the moment and then removed from the moment and forced to contemplate things. I thought, you know what? We're going to go to the hospital. They're going to slap a cast on there. 6 weeks later, I'm going to go back. They're going to cut it off, and everything's going to be peachy. I was thinking surgeries, loss of movement, hardcore arthritis, potentially having to use a cane for the rest of my life. I'm too young for that. I remember thinking, I did not sign up for this. Well, we rarely do. We rarely, sign up for anything. Stuff sometimes happens, and as we progress through this series, you're going to see that just doesn't work that way. The funny thing is, I knew that, but when you're suddenly brought to yourself, you're humbled before you, and you're facing yourself, some very real chills and some very real possibilities that you refuse to contemplate ever are certainly suddenly thrust upon you. All right, we're going to move on to part 3, which I believe is on mindfulness. Part 3, mindfulness. Choose to participate. In the last episode, I talked about gratitude and how easily the people and moments in our lives can become just things in the background. I shared how I personally fell into this trap and how I was snapped back into reality. Today's episode will be exploring mindfulness and its importance in our daily lives. In part 2, I talked about gratitude from my own personal perspective. I was snapped into the moment and forced to participate alongside the other players. Being laid up had forced my contemplation and participation in the moment and in the series of moments that made up the entire incident. Being in the state of mindfulness requires active participation. We can choose to participate actively and fully in the moments that make up our lives, or you can be like me, forced into participating. One way or the other, active participation is mandatory. It can be very easy to fall into a trap of numbers. We count numbers on a clock and dates on a calendar. Not that there is anything wrong with that. I mean, these numbers serve as an important function as they sync us together with each other and with the important stuff in our lives that we need to do and the places we need to be. But as we start to focus on the tick marks rather than the details, then we start to be less and less aware of the important details of our lives. It's easy to do because we become so busy day to day, paying our bills, working, taking care of our family and friends, fulfilling our commitments, and so on. We put so much on our plates that it becomes very difficult to devote quality time to the individual moments in our lives. Just like falling into a trap of numbers, these are realities in our world that we are a part of. These are necessities of everyday modern life. So how do we navigate modern life and still be mindful and present in the moment? It's not as hard as we might think. Many faiths, philosophies, and life paths teach, promote, and practice mindfulness. Most of the time it's practiced through different forms of meditations and prayer, as well as many different types of practical exercises. Now, if you're listening to this broadcast, I would assume that you've been taught and practiced at least one form of meditation, prayer, or some sort of practical exercise along the way. If I presume too much about you, then my suggestion is to search out different ways and methods until you find one that works great for you. We all have our preferred methods that we use, teach, and practice with. Not any one method is foolproof, and not every method will work for everyone. Practices such as meditation can prove to be difficult for many at first. I mean, it certainly was for me. It takes practice and dedication just like any other skill that you may want to learn and practice. One thing I always tell people who are having trouble with it is to keep in mind even just a few minutes of meditation versus no meditation at all is transformative and will open up a whole new world that you never knew existed. For me, when I started learning meditation years ago, I had so much trouble just sitting still. I had a lot of trouble focusing on my breath and emptying my thoughts. I turned to guided meditations to help me through the process. Eventually, I moved on to more traditional forms of meditation. I had searched the internet looking for the perfect guided meditation, and I tried so many of them. Not that any of them were bad, but they just didn't quite have what I needed. So I decided to make my own guided meditation. I wrote my own script and recorded my voice and added music with Audacity. It took a lot of tries before I got it right, but this is something anyone can do with a little patience and some knowledge of basic editing. If you guys want to see a tutorial on how to do this, just let me know in the comments and I'll see what I can do. I want to share a few of the methods and practices I use that work very well for me. Before I get to that, I wanted to mention that it's imperative that we all need to take time for ourselves from time to time. We get so busy in our lives doing stuff for others that we forget and even neglect ourselves. If we neglect ourselves for too long, then we find ourselves being of no use to anyone. Mindfulness is a personal and internal process that requires our focus and attention. I practice prayer and meditation on a daily basis. My favorite meditation practice is a walking meditation. A walking meditation uses a different main focus point other than breathing. It uses the action and motion of our feet and body and uses breath as a secondary focus point. When you focus on the motion and movements of your body, it becomes much easier to start to notice all of the other things that are going on around you. For me, when I practice a walking meditation, I start to notice the sort of ballet that's going on around me. More importantly, I start to notice how I fit into that ballet. When I first started practicing my walking meditations, I found very secluded places to walk, such as hiking trails and the mountains and things like that. I found that it was much easier to go to a place like this at first because you have no distractions and it makes it easier to focus in on what you're trying to focus on. As I grew more comfortable, I moved on to like parks, zoos, things like that. Eventually, I graduated to much more busier places like city streets. This is my favorite type of meditation because it makes me more aware of what is going on around me, and it helps me see that I am part of the sum total of this whole experience. One of my favorite practical exercises that I practice, I had talked about years ago on one of our older KOA shows. I believe the title of that show was How to Handle Gratitude. Now, just to clarify, this might make me sound like a creep or some kind of weird stalker or something like that, but rest assured I am not. I go to a busy place like a mall or park or something like that, and I sit and observe. I focus in on what people are doing, how they are acting, and I also try to reach out and feel what they are feeling. I try to think what they're thinking. I found that not only is this a good exercise in mindfulness, but a great exercise in practicing empathy. To recap, being mindful requires participation. That participation will come in the form of actively choosing to be present in the moment, or being brought into the moment in an instant like I was. There are many different ways to practice mindfulness. Seek out and find the method or methods that work best for you. Practicing mindfulness will impact your life and transform the way you start to see the world and your place in it. So participation is very important. It's kind of mandatory. Don't fall victim like I did to stagnation. I chose to go on autopilot, and I chose to allow moments to come and go without actively participating. I chose to believe that I, again, was the center of the universe and that everything just happens because I said so. When in reality, if I would have paid closer attention, if I would have focused on those moments, I would have realized that only my choices affect what I can do, but other people choose to help me, and other people choose to be there, and other people choose to be in those moments as well. And before we move on, I want to point out that although I said that I practice meditation daily, and I talked about my favorite meditation, the walking meditation, I just want to point out again that stagnation does set in when we get really comfortable with our daily practices. And we have to mix it up. Can't do the same thing over and over and over and over again, because then that's when you go on autopilot. That's when you get very comfortable, and then we get lazy. So mix it up as best you can. Try different meditations. And again, I'm not going to tell you guys what meditation is the best, what you have to do and what you should do, and blah, blah, blah. What I'm going to tell you is seek out different forms of meditation. Seek out different forms of work in your body, things like this. Because you don't want to become stagnant. You want to keep pushing yourself. And had I not gotten comfortable, and had I not gotten stagnant, I probably would have seen this stuff these continual themes that we're talking about here. I probably would have been aware of those before. And I wouldn't have had to break my damn leg to figure it out. Let's move on to part 4. Part 4, Compassion and Empathy. You feel me? In the last episode, I talked about mindfulness and how participation is required for us to be aware and present in the individual moments that make up our whole reality. I shared a few of my favorite exercises that I use to achieve and stay mindful. If you have not listened to parts 1 through 3 yet, please go check those episodes out before continuing. In today's episode, we'll be exploring compassion and empathy, their importance in our lives, and how to develop and practice them daily. In the blog for this episode, I talked about compassion being understood and how it's used in a few different ways. I talked about how some out there use it as more of a buzzword, using the word to fit into whatever flavor they were into that week. I also mentioned how the majority of folks fall into the recognized definition of the word, which is a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate the suffering. And how if we practice empathy and learn to be in a compassionate state of being, then we can transcend beyond just the emotional response and feeling of compassion. Before I get into any of that, I wanted to just point out that I'm not saying that one form of compassion is better than another. Everyone is at different points of their journeys, and that is the natural progression we must follow. What we're talking about here is the different states of compassion and how I transcended my understanding of it using empathy, and how you can too. Before we talk about how the feeling of compassion can be transcended into a state of being, we must first understand how empathy fits into the equation. And we'll start by talking about empathy versus sympathy. The most common definition of the word sympathy is feeling of pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. That sounds an awful lot like the definition of compassion, which was, again, a feeling of deep sympathy and sorrow for another who is stricken by misfortune, accompanied by a strong desire to alleviate the suffering. Both of these definitions account for the individual's feelings towards someone else's situation or problems. These are both more commonly an emotional response felt at the moment of realization at the expense of someone else. Both of these are describing a need to project our feelings onto someone else and their problem. The only real difference between these two is that compassion takes this feeling one step further and compels action. Compassion, even used in the most common way, is not a bad thing. When I had my accident, I am grateful for those people who came to my aid, as they felt a desire to comfort me in my time of misfortune. They are a good example of the common understanding of compassion. They really didn't know what to do with me, so they did the best they knew how, because it went beyond just feeling sorry for me. Those who had sympathy for me stood off to the side. Those who felt compassion ran to my aid. But as good and pure as the intention may be, this feeling and emotional response cannot be useful in all situations. For example, in an emergency situation, it could be deadly for those rushing into a dangerous environment to help another person, no matter how much we feel the need to. Empathy is the ability to experience, share, and understanding the feelings of another person. When we encounter a person who is in crisis, we are in a much better position to truly help them if we share the feelings, share the experience, truly understand, rather than just projecting our feelings and experiences onto them. Empathy allows us to better help someone confront an issue on a more united front, with both sharing the whole experience. Empathy is the key to transcending beyond just feeling sorry for someone and being compelled to act on their behalf. Empathy allows us to act as their ally in whatever they are facing. In Part 3, I shared an exercise that helped me build upon the skill of empathy. In brief, it requires going to places where people are going about their normal days and just sitting and observing their patterns and behaviors. By doing this, you not only become more aware of what's going on around you, but you can start to feel what they are feeling, almost sense what they are thinking. I want to share with you a few tips to help empower and expand your understanding of compassion. We have to take a non-judgmental approach to others and their situations. It can be very difficult to look at someone or something without our preconceived judgments about them. It seems to be in our very nature to do this almost immediately. But like many things, we only approach others in this manner because we were conditioned to. Part of the Knight's journey is to unlearn what we have learned and to recondition ourselves for the better. Go out of your way every day to keep yourself from judging 2 things. Give that a few weeks, and then up the ante to say 5 things or people that you can interact with or situations you deal with without first prejudging what you see. Treat others as you wish for them to treat you. I know you've been hearing this for as long as you can remember, but it's important to not forget how wise of a thought this is. In order for us to learn and be more compassionate, we must first understand what it is that we expect from others. We must learn to know ourselves in such a way that there is nothing about ourselves that would make us love ourselves any less. Once we understand how we want others to treat us, then we will naturally follow suit and start treating others in a compassionate and respectful way. Here's another one that you've probably heard countless times in your life: walking a mile in another person's shoes. I understand that there'll be times where we cannot possibly know what another person is going through, but we can strive to understand nonetheless. I can tell you my previous lines of work, I have just about seen it all, or so I keep telling myself, and have dealt with many situations that I would probably never personally find myself in. The key for me being able to help them in that moment was to be empathetic and to try and imagine what they must be feeling and thinking. It is this first step to problem solving that many people seem to miss and usually keeps them separated and distanced from those they are trying to help. This also points to another notion that I find many people trapping themselves with. Knights do not seek to be detached from those around them. We seek to participate in the chaos of life. Empathy allows us to participate. Never take anything too seriously, nor too personally. Far too many of us let our feelings keep us from loving and caring for those around us all of the time. First thing we do when trying to help others, to show our compassion for them, is to take everything a bit too seriously. Now, don't mistake what I'm saying for all situations, because there are some situations that require immediate, direct, and serious action. But most situations do not. When I say don't take everything too personally, I mean to say that we shouldn't allow what people say or do to affect us deep down on a personal level. We shouldn't let others or their situations affect us in a way that it comes home with us or follows us wherever we go. We have to realize that most things that happen in the world around us are out of our control. The only thing we can control is how those things affect us. All things are connected. What happens to one of us can certainly happen to all of us. Because a knight respects all life, when we find ourselves dealing with a person who is in a bad spot, or even when interacting with others, we start to develop a basic respect and decency for them, and it keeps things in a fair perspective. Always remember, when dealing with someone or a situation, try and learn from what's going on. Always remember that what is happening to this person can very easily happen to you someday. If you help them through this issue, you have not only gained a friend and an ally, but you've also gained valuable knowledge for the next time you face a similar situation. Compassion is a very powerful word, but even more powerful is the use of it in our daily lives. You can certainly change the world one person and one situation at a time. You do not have to have superpowers to save the world. All you need is a heart big enough to love and respect it. The goal for a knight is to not act in a compassionate manner at all times, but to be compassionate when dealing with the world around us, especially when dealing with ourselves. For a knight, the word compassion does not just mean to help others through the toughest times in their lives. The word compassion means for us an undying love and respect for others. It's no coincidence that I chose compassion to be the fourth part of this series. I wrote a couple years ago that compassion is not just a feeling, it's not just an emotional response that we have towards others. If it's practiced and cultivated, and if you add empathy into your routine, it can go way, way beyond just an emotional response, or way, way beyond just a feeling to some outside influence. If you can understand that completely, compassion then becomes a state of being. We're taught all the time that we're supposed to be compassionate. We're supposed to act in a compassionate manner. Well, for me, it seems like being in a compassionate state of being is a much more powerful tool than just emotionally responding to things that we are seeing or dealing with. And I always like to go back to that piece that I wrote years ago, because it's still relevant to me and to many others who have read it and asked me to explain it to them and sit down and teach it to them. All right, let's go on to part 5. I believe part 5 is humility. Mind, body, and soul. When the body breaks and the mind is left intact, a process takes place where one is pitted against the other, leaving the soul standing in between the two, trying to play peacekeeper. Part 5, humility. I am only human. In the last KOA live show that I hosted, I talked about pride and passion. I touched on how these two words are almost seen as bad or harmful in many philosophies and disciplines. how as long as we do not let them go to extremes and become arrogance and obsession, then pride and passion are not only useful, but essential to living and walking a complete path. But what I didn't get into on that broadcast was that you don't have to go to extremes to misuse pride or passion. There are many different degrees in between pride and arrogance, passion and obsession. Today we're going to talk about pride, and I will illustrate for you how pride can be taken to the degree of arrogance. I want to warn you before we get too deep into this today, this show may get dark at some points. When I originally set out to do this series, I wanted to make patience a separate episode in the series. But what I didn't consider was how much of a role patience plays in the entire healing and recovery process. I'm going to be talking about patience as it relates to pride today, because for me, this is where the two met almost to the extreme. In the blog I wrote for this episode, I gave an example of how I hated going to the store because I had to use those electric carts to get around because I didn't have the strength to use only my crutches in such a large and crowded area, and because I was not able to put any weight on my foot, even if I got tired. So the whole process was exhausting, which for me was very frustrating because I'm not one who easily gets tired. I didn't like the stares that I would get from some people. I swear they were talking about me under their breath. I could swear they were. I would try and figure out why they were staring and what they were thinking. This would really piss me off because, how dare they see me in this way? I am strong and capable, not some broken, weak invalid, unable to function and serve a purpose. My sense of empathy poisoned by my impatience and my pride. Frustration and anger turns pride into arrogance. I was unable to connect to them because of the escalating frustration and quickly mounting rage burning up from the pit of my belly, waiting to become an inferno of fire and brimstone. During these moments, I would often say to myself, how dare they stare at me, taking pity on me, feeling sorry for me, mocking me, and talking shit under their breath at me. Do they know just who in the fuck they are dealing with? This caused me to be frustrated with not just the strangers around me, but the people that cared for me. I would carry around that frustration with me wherever I went, just waiting for an opportunity to, quote-unquote, show them just who in the fuck they're dealing with. Frustrated by my lack of physical ability, frustrated by the fact that I felt like I was in everyone's way and slowing down the people I was there with. This, of course, would distress my wife, and she would try her best to calm me down. But her attempts were in vain. I would not be calmed and pacified. I wanted to unleash hell upon all of them. I would then turn my venom on her. It would turn into a fight oftentimes right in the middle of wherever we were at the moment. And there were a few times where we would just leave a shopping cart full of groceries in the middle of a store because things would escalate out of control. In this state of mind, things would turn into an inferno rather quickly. I dealt with this a lot in the first couple of months, almost to the point where I would avoid going to any place that was either too large for me to get around on crutches or too crowded. And this added more weight to my load by placing a chip on my shoulder, getting me further away from the person that I really am. I would get very impatient as well. When I was recently diagnosed with a blood clot because of the surgery I had a few months ago, it almost became the straw that broke the camel's back. More than once in this whole ordeal, I kept getting the sense that the doctors and nurses were constantly lying to me. I became paranoid about it. I felt that either they were scared to tell me straight up, or they were trying to spare my feelings. Either way, at this point, I was all out of patience, and I was not having that shit anymore. I was done being lied to, having my feelings spared, being treated as a poor creature who needed sympathy and pity. I allowed my mind and the feeling of self-pity to manipulate my reaction to the world outside of myself. Because I was getting so down on myself for not being able and capable that I was projecting my own bullshit onto the people around me. It was I who was staring at myself. It was I who was taking pity and feeling sorry for myself. It was I talking shit under my own breath at myself. Not that some of the other people that I talked about a few minutes ago were not acting in the way that they thought they were, but before the accident, I would not have given two shits about what anyone thought about me, and I shouldn't have cared now either. I said in the opening of the episode that mind, body, and soul, when the body breaks and the mind is left intact, a process takes place where one is pitted against the other, leaving the soul standing in between the two, trying to play peacekeeper. I, my mind, would give my body no quarter, would show it no mercy. It was almost at times disgusted by the lack of the body's ability, questioning my body's motivation and loyalty to the whole, becoming more and more impatient that it would never get better, poisoned by the prospect that somehow the body was useless and not worthy of respect. My body, trying to focus on healing and recovering, assuring the mind that if it would pitch in and direct positive thoughts in the body's direction, that the healing process would go much faster and more complete. Stuck in between the two was my soul, trying to keep the peace, trying to distract the mind and reminding it of the lessons it had once conceived, taught, and learned, trying to bring the three of them back together. Many hours, days, and weeks of contemplation takes place, considering the needs of the whole to put the parts back in place, placing faith and trust in those around me who know how to make my body better, understanding that allowing a quote-unquote civil war to take place within myself will not make anything better, using the whole of my will to focus on the act of healing and becoming stronger and more capable than before. Last week I started physical therapy. I was told to start walking around on my foot again. Although it hurts like hell, I'm happy for the pain. I'm happy because pain is only temporary and necessary to recovery. The pain gives me renewed vigor and motivation to push myself as far as possible. With a new mindset and a renewed sense of patience and a healthy sense of pride, I will be good as new in no time. I am not ashamed to share these thoughts with you. I am not ashamed to have felt the way that I did. I understand that this is the path and progression that is needed in order for me to take the next steps in the process. I wish that I did not have to drag those I love under the bus with me, but I am grateful that she knows and understands the person I really am and allowed me to go through this, even though it caused her pain, misery, and much embarrassment. After all, I am only human. Indeed. And surprise, surprise, I'm still human, as we all are. This kind of reminds me, as I listen to it again, this reminds me of something that my good friend and host of The Labyrinth, Charles McBride, once said. If every time you see a knight fall, you say to them, "You are no knight," or "You are not acting knightly," you will do nothing for their fall. Instead, remind them of the virtues they uphold. Remind them of their training. Encourage them to seek clarity and focus. The path is not a title to be used to encourage right action, nor is it a cookie to be rewarded. It is a path. As such, it is to be walked, to fall upon, to even question the value of walking down it. However, a person walks a path for the destinations, for the joy of walking a path. In this, remind a knight not that they have a name attached to them, but the value they have in the path, the training they have endured, and the purpose they have sought. Now, I'll apologize to you now for some of the strong language in that episode. I had come to a very dark place at that point. And although I was grateful for many of the people in my life, I was swinging on everyone. Not literally, but figuratively. And sometimes I wanted to. I'm not going to lie. It took me to a very dark place. A place that I'm usually very, very good at keeping in check. But given all the stress and all the pressure and treating myself like crap, this kind of goes back to when I said in a couple of clips ago about making sure we take time to take care of ourselves. I was literally at war with myself in many, many ways. All right, let's go to the last clip that I have for you today. We'll talk about it, and then we'll get this show on the road. Men are not shaped by their victories. They are shaped by their defeats. Today we continue in the series, The Road to Recovery and New Beginnings, with Part 6, Will. The universe hits like a... In Part 5, I shared with you some of the low points of my journey. Some of those were embarrassing, for not just myself, but for those who love me and care for me, mainly my wife. Today I'm going to share with you a renewed fire and spirit. It has been one hell of a ride since February 4th, 2016. I've had to deal with some depression, a lot of sleepless nights, pain that made me cringe and cry sometimes, frustration that made me want to lash out on unsuspecting victims, and projecting my anger and frustration onto those who love and care for me, just to name a few. 2016 started off being the most horrible year that I can recall in my time on Earth, at least from a personal standpoint. Let's do a quick rundown. I broke my leg in several places, resulting in surgery and more recently being diagnosed with a blood clot because of the surgery, which, by the way, is still there. But I'll talk about that in a few minutes because I'm going to rant about that a little bit. Everyone in my house has either had the flu or some other serious respiratory illness that required going to the hospital or getting a bunch of medication, stuff like that. My third oldest had a ruptured appendix that required emergency surgery and a 5-day hospital stay because of the massive infection that it left her. My second oldest had my first grandson, which, by the way, is awesome. But then my grandson had to spend a few days in the hospital for some unknown virus or illness. The best part is, it's only April. So I'm going to rant for a minute about this whole blood clot thing because, as we discussed last week, there's a lot of frustration and stuff like that, but I'm going to tell you about this blood clot thing because maybe you'll see where I'm coming from here. So as you guys know, I was diagnosed with a small blood clot because of the surgery I had for the broken leg. Now I am grateful that they had the foresight to check and address the issue before it became a long-term problem, or even worse, death. But that's where it went from good to bad. From there, they sent me to the emergency room, to which I got lectured and questioned by the emergency room attendants as to why I was even there and why did the surgeon not deal with it themselves. I was given some medicine and told to follow up with my primary doctor in a week. So I followed up and was told that they didn't want to deal with it either and that they would just refer me to some kind of specialist. Just as a footnote here, they tell you that blood clots are extremely dangerous, and they also tell you that the medicine is a lifeline for you, that you can't miss not one single dose, and that the doses must be at the same time every single day. So the referral was made and approved a few days later after it was sent. A whole week or 10 days go by, and I'm like 2 days away from being out of my medicine. I go and try to follow up, and nobody knows what to do or who is supposed to be responsible for my care going forward relating to the blood clot. No one even wants to refill the medicine, and as I said, I'm out of time. I've got 2 days left. So in the very same breath, they tell me how dangerous it is without the medicine, but also then tell me they don't want to have the responsibility to refill the medicine. I am no closer to an appointment either to get it rechecked. They finally begrudgingly refilled the medicine for me for just 1 week. Here I am in about week 3, and again, I'm 2 days before my quote-unquote life-saving medicine runs out again. They finally see me for a reevaluation. They do the scan and see that the blood clot is still there. It's not any bigger or smaller, and it hasn't moved. It's just sitting there like it was before. So that's a good thing. Then they tell me that they cannot give me more medicine because it is someone else's responsibility until I see the specialist again next week. Then it'll be their responsibility. So here I go again, fighting to get this quote-unquote life-saving medication from the same people who don't want to be responsible for it, but at the same time want to preach how important it is. So that's just another example of why I've spent the past couple of months cursing the year 2016 thus far. But let's consider this for a moment. Isn't this when the strong show what they are made of? Isn't it in times of hardship and grief that we find a way to overcome? When the very universe seems to be conspiring against you, isn't it time to stand up and fight? I certainly think so. The strongest amongst us are more than muscle, and strength is measured in more than just how much a person can lift or how hard they can hit. Strength goes deeper than the muscles. It is also found in the deepest parts of ourselves. It is that attribute that gets us back up after we've been knocked down. When life comes crashing down around us, it is our strength that allows us to push back with everything we have. When we are backed into a corner, it is that gives us the courage to stand our ground and keep fighting until we have nothing left. Will, as we are using it here, is defined as to control and deliberately exert it to do something or to restrain one's own impulses. The faculty by which a person decides and initiates action. As an example, she has an iron will. Determination, willpower, resolution, resolve, drive, commitment, dedication, doggedness, and tenacity are other words used to describe will. Using our will means making a deliberate choice in deciding a course of action. It is the backbone of our strength. It is the backbone of our courage. It is applied to every deliberate thing we do. Depending on how strong your will is, will depend on how successful you are. Where am I going with all this? Well, I'm glad you asked. I have decided that I'm tired of being broken and beaten. I'm tired of feeling down on myself. I'm ready to fight for what I want, and I will do so with ferocity. I will not stand here another moment and let circumstances of my own making or of those brought upon me from someone else to give me pause anymore. This was not who I was before the accident, and it sure as hell will not be who I am going forward either. I allowed myself to fall victim to my own bullshit in a moment of confusion. I am in the home stretch for the healing process, and all parts of myself are in harmony with each other. I am crushing my physical therapy, and with each exercise, with each time I sweat and curse, I get closer to the end of this chapter, this one with a happy ending. At the end of this story, I will be victorious. I will exert my will and tackle each and every obstacle with strength, courage, and ferocity. I leave you with this. Each and every time life hits me and knocks me to the ground, I will get back up with a smile on my face and say, "You hit like a..." So that was recorded about 3 months ago. And the reason I wanted to do this show with the clips and some live commentary is because it's time to put this to bed. It's time to put this series away and let the archives have it. So it's been 3 months since that last kind of update, whatever. So where are we at now? Well, as I said, I wasn't going to stand there. I was going to give it my all. And I did I did such a good job that I busted one of the pins that was holding all my stuff together. I went real hard, and I went too hard. So I had to go back for another surgery and have him pull that out. 2 weeks later, I jumped right back into it. And here we are now. Everything's going well. There's a possibility that I'm still going to feel some pain and weakness for up to 2 years is what they're telling me. And I'm okay with that. It is what it is. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep fighting until it's as good as it can get, whatever that means, whatever that holds for us here. I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. I want to thank all of you because you take the time out of your lives and help make the KOA part of your lives, part of your path, part of your practice. I also want to thank those who reached out to me who was concerned about how the healing process was going. I hope that I shared with you what you were looking for. And of course, you can continue to send me letters and emails and whatever else, however else you have to get a hold of me. And I'd be happy to talk with you about them. But if you want the latest and most up-to-date content, make sure you're a subscriber to both the KOA YouTube channel and here at Blog Talk Radio. Because whenever we do upload content to the YouTube page, you'll be first notified. When we do shows here at Blog Talk Radio, you'll also be notified. I love you all very much. And until next time, awaken the night within.